what's up everybody? It's Pastor Isaac, and I hope you're excited to get today's life group going. And what we're going to be talking about in tonight's life group is the sermon that we preached this past Sunday called He's a Bread House. I know it's kind of silly, but that's what I like to do sometimes. But anyways, it was the first part of our series on the I am statements of Jesus. And this week we really wanted to talk about what Jesus was stating when he said, I am the bread of life. And when Jesus said that, he had just fed 5,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 fish. And it was this miraculous miracle that everyone saw, and everyone was in wonder of what Jesus was able to do. And so they followed Jesus across the Sea of Galilee, and they wanted more of that bread. They wanted to see Jesus provide for their needs that way again. And Jesus wasn't ready to do it that way again because he didn't want them to focus on the how, focus on how he was providing for their needs, but he wanted them to be able to focus on who he is, that I am Jehovah Jireh. So the first thing that we talked about is how the bread of life is more about a who than a how. And that God, and Jesus is God with skin on, one of his names in the Old Testament is Jehovah Jireh, the God who provides. And that God who provides will not always provide for us the same way, but he will always provide for us, but in different ways many times through different seasons of life. And the second point that we talked about is that the bread of life is seasonal. We use the example of one of my favorite restaurants, Tallulah's on Cookman Avenue in Asbury Park. And one of my favorite things to get there is this delicious kale salad. I know what you're thinking, that's super bougie, Pastor Isaac. And you're right, it is. There is a bougie bone in my body that loves to get a kale salad at Tallulah's. And so I would go in there every single, it felt like every single week, and I would always order the same thing. And then I remember this at one particular season, they said to me, oh, I'm so sorry, Isaac, that's not on the menu anymore because that's a seasonal item. But we have a different item called the Thai crunchy salad. And I was disappointed that I couldn't order what I always got, but I tried something new, and you know what? I found out it was still amazing because it all comes from the same kitchen. And we use the example that the items on the menu at Tallulah's may change, but the name at the top of it never changes. And that's the same way that it is with our God, that the items and the ways that he provides for us may change. The Bible tells us in the book of Exodus, when the Israelites were going through the wilderness, and for 40 years they ate manna every single day. That's how God provided for their needs. But then there came a day when the manna stopped. But that didn't mean that God had forsaken them. It just meant that God was going to provide for their needs a different way. And so God's provision, the bread of life, is seasonal. And then lastly, we talked about the bread of life is a daily meal. In the book of Exodus, when they would go out and collect the manna, they would go out every single morning and collect fresh manna. But the next day, if they had any manna left over, it would rot and it was full of worms, and they wouldn't be able to eat it. And you could only eat what you collected that day. And the bread of life is a daily meal that we have to eat. We cannot rely on yesterday's bread, yesterday's anointing, yesterday's strength in order to fight today's battles, that we have to go get fresh bread every single morning. Jesus even said this when he told us how to pray. He said, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And then he said, give us this day our daily bread. And the bread of life is not a meal that we just eat on Sunday mornings, but we have to feed our spirits with the bread of life every single day. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of your group. Hope you enjoy the discussion questions, and we look forward to seeing you this Sunday as we continue this series.